make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners regarding the FAA advisory and the sites. So next slide, Sue. Yeah, Chris, I'm hoping we'll be done by 10. We did schedule this meeting for an hour. We just have this one topic to go over here. So, the FAA advisory provides guidance on certain land uses that have the potential to attract hazardous wildlife on or near public use airports. And in Deschutes County, there are only 2 public use airports, the Redmond Airport and the Bend Airport. That advisory, in addition to landfills, governs other things like golf courses, feedlots, anything that might attract wildlife. And for landfills, the FAA recommends the siting of new facilities be done outside of a 5-mile perimeter. And the issue at hand here is that this is a recommendation. And so Tim Burnell and I went up to talk with the engineer and manager for the Redmond Airport specifically on this. And Tim, if you want to chime in at this point and do the discussion regarding the Redmond Airport.
Yeah, so we met with them, I believe it was the 17th or so of January. And to talk to them about the airport overlay that they had, and whether there was any possibility that we would be able to fit a landfill at the Negus site. In that conversation, they spoke to the concerns of bird migration through their overlay, and in particular talked a bit about this the 5-mile perimeter FAA advisory, and said that they could not support a landfill at that site due to that bird migration, and cited that 5-mile radius would be, that recommendation would be something that they would want strongly considered in the siting of this, that they would not be able to support a landfill at that particular location. So that brought us to then having to bring this back over to the Bend Airport as well. And you should probably talk about your conversations with them.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. So after we met with the Redmond Airport, we did reach out to the airport manager for the Bend Airport and spoke with her about it. And their concerns were similar. They had stated that they would not support a facility being sited within that 5-mile radius. With that, the consideration was that maybe we should respect that 5-mile radius. I kind of jumped ahead on the slides, but I want to finish on this one here. So I mentioned that this advisory only applies to the Bend and Redmond airports. There's a little bit of a conflict in the advisory. At one point, it states that the radius is determined at the closest point of airport traffic operations, which would be the end of a runway or a taxiway. Another statement in the advisory indicates that it's from the closest point of the airport property boundary. What we've done is recognize the airport property boundary. We want to be conservative on this, so we pushed it out to the property boundary rather than the aircraft movement areas and there's so a little bit of conflict in the advisory, but we did take the conservative approach on this. So next slide, Sue. So this kind of summarizes the conversations that Tim and I had. So the manager and engineer for the Redmond Airport expressed concerns, and we're not going to support siting a site within the 5-mile exclusion zone. Their concerns are both with loafing, which is a biological term for where birds like to hang out. They like to loaf at landfills, but they also commute daily from nesting points to the feeding facility. So their concerns were regarding both of those, and the city of Redmond itself also concurred with the position that the exclusion should be considered a requirement. The Bend Airport, I learned a few things, is the 3rd busiest general aviation airport in the state. One of their runway approaches is generally over the Brigger site. I don't know if they went over the Bear Creek site at all, but that was one of the points they brought up. And the airport manager and the city of Bend both concurred with a position similar to the city of Redmond, that we should consider this a requirement rather than a recommendation. So next slide, Sue. So this map shows the exclusion areas, that purple ring around the two airports, and then the three sites that are affected by this. The Redmond site is completely in the exclusion zone, so the entire thing falls out. So if you want to go to the next slide. So again, the Redmond site completely in the exclusion zone. The irrigation district property off of Bear Creek Road it takes our usable acreage down to 210 acres. And our minimum criteria for a facility is 250 acres. So we do not have enough room out there for it. Similar with the Ricker site, that it drops us to 200 acres for the site. So we can't meet our base requirements for 250 acres for usable landfill property. Okay, next slide, Sue, which is open to public comments and questions. So I'll start with people in the, excuse me, in the room here. Does anybody have any questions for starters on this?
I just wanted to ask.
State your name as well.
I'm sorry, this is Cherie Appleby of Ghost Rock Ranch. Does this also include the two private landing strips that are Juniper and Deschutes on Bear Creek? Is that part of the calculation?
Well, those airstrips are not covered under the FAA advisories. Again, these are public use airports. There are specific definitions for public use airports. That's not a legal challenge.
I got it right here.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks.
Stephanie Marshall,
Thanks.
Assistant Legal Counsel at Deschutes County. So we got this from the EPA, the regional EPA Environmental Protection Specialist, excuse me, with the FAA. And there is a statutory or a federal definition in 49 USC 47-102 subsection 22. A public use airport is public or a privately owned airport used or intended to be used for public purposes. That is a reliever airport or determined by the secretary, this is a federal determination, to have at least 2,500 passenger boardings each year and to relieve scheduled passenger aircraft service. So it is kind of a big definition, but Chad did reach out to the FAA to get that information. So wanted to put that on the record.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
My name's Angie Dunham. I have a question about the size of the airport, the Bend Airport now, and the landfill is projected for 100 years, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So have you projected the growth of the airport for 100 years? And then like assume that maybe the airport might grow and then we would then be within those bounds of the 5 miles.
So using not landfill as an example, and Stephanie, step in anytime on this. So in the 1990s, the rules changed. I was talking with a group earlier before the meeting started when we transitioned from dumps to landfills. At that time, the EPA working with the FAA established rules regarding siting of landfills. And at the time, it was 5,000 feet for prop only, piston aircraft only, and 10,000 feet for jet aircraft only. And with the 5 mile rule, the 5 mile advisory, it is new facilities. So if rules were to change, an established landfill would most likely be grandfathered in under those rules. So it does not preclude us from citing something outside a 5 mile radius. And if a new public airport were to be constructed or the Bend Airport were to be expanded, it would likely not be subject to that because the facility was in existence before the statutes changed.
That's 100% correct. So when you're permitting something, you're looking at the rules in place as of today. And once you're approved, whether it's for an airport expansion or a solid waste facility, you've got to meet the standards today. How that looks in the future, if there's an expansion of either the airport or perhaps the solid waste facility, all of the regulations in place at that time would be taken into consideration. So, you're right. You summarized it well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Just to follow up,
Sure.
so your 100-year plan doesn't coincide or mingle with the airport's 100-year, like there's no communication between the two. So it's like taxpayers, we just look at one and make a decision, look at the other, rather than like as a community, try to build in a way that would support both entities.
So I think that harkens back to
Yeah.
the opening statement that Tim Burnell had made on behalf of the two of us at the last meeting here. So the role of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee is to locate sites that meet the regulatory requirements, have engineering feasibility, and there is a small economic component regarding the transfer distances here. Things like that are policy decisions that would go before the Board of County Commissioners for consideration. If using this group as an example here, the concerns about property values, impact of quality of life in neighborhoods, those are policy decisions, not in the area of what the Solid Waste Advisory Committee's task is on this process we're in right now. You know, if I suppose the group wanted to bring that forward to the Board of County Commissioners, certainly the members of the public are can do that. So yeah.
Good morning, Jim Busian, President of Preserve East Bend, nonprofit that we're working to help you relocate the landfill, 181, 300, 315 of the Nagus site. We concur with your decision that we're hoping you're going to make today, which is to take those sites off based on the FAA recommendations and the managers of these airports and your own decision-making process. I'm hopeful that the county commissioners will concur. The only thing I would add is you did mention the expanding the boundaries to make it conservative. The distance,
Yes.
which is wonderful. If that gets squishy and that gets pulled back, we'll probably be revisiting this conversation again. The only other thing I would ask is that you consider, as we move forward, this is about life safety. And siting the landfill as far away from airports is always a good thing, because we don't want to have a plane impact a bird, somebody killed on the ground, or somebody killed on the plane.
Absolutely.
So that's the only thing I would add to your decision-making process today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I'm remiss on one thing here. I mentioned Robin Vora, one of our SWAC members, is out of the country right now, so he is not in attendance. And he did send me an email, and I'm going to read just the portions of it that apply to the advisory and these impacted sites here. So what Robin says, I recommend that the SWAC seriously consider the 5-mile radius from the landfill and airport as a guideline, not an absolute requirement. I think there are some BLM sites and possibly associated private, and we will want to consider that are right around the 5-mile radius or maybe just outside. We should view the 5-mile recommendation as a significant guideline and not a rule, not rule out a site just for that reason. So that is the statement from one of the advisory committee members.
This
Hey,
is.
Chad.
Yes.
Chad, Mike Riley has a question.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for reading that email, Chad. Robin had asked me to make sure that happened, so I appreciate you doing that. I guess my question is just maybe to just review for a minute what it means, what this rule means for, I mean, I know we currently don't have whatever the pit's called immediately south of the existing landfill, just south of Rickard Road there. But, you know, if that was to be looked at again in a different way or with some variation to it, how do these rules apply in terms of quote unquote expansion of the existing footprint essentially at the same location?
Yeah, so Robin had asked specifically about the site, the Rose Pit, which is right across the street from us. And I think there were some members from I think Daniel Bullock had asked specifically about this. So a couple of things about that site. It's under 500 acres. That's our minimum criteria. We want 500 acres, 250 acres of landfill, 250 acres of buffer. So it's too small there. There are groundwater wells immediately adjacent to the property boundary in a quarter-mile area, intrude significantly into the site. Probably the more substantial issue is the Bonneville Power Administration has a transmission line that runs right down the middle of that site. And relocating a federal agency power line is probably just as hard to do as siting a landfill. So there are some significant hurdles with that site. So it was never given much consideration. Primarily, it dropped out initially because of the 500 acre criteria, but when we started looking at it more closely, it's got way too many problems, so. So
Yeah, but that's not really about, I guess, okay, I understand that there's a set of challenges, but that didn't answer my question. My question
I'm
was,
sorry.
how do these FAA rules apply to that site? I guess I'm not jumping to the conclusion yet about
Yeah,
whether that should be looked at again in a different way, but just how do these rules apply?
yeah, that site is outside the 5 mile radius. The 5 mile radius runs essentially through the upper, about 1/3 of Knott landfill.
Uh-huh.
So if we were to, the DEQ would not look at that as an expansion. I think they would probably look at that as a new facility requiring a new permit. So the FAA advisory would not apply in that case, would be my interpretation.
Okay.
I just wanted to add one more thing about the FAA, because I think it has to apply to the airlink, the flight path from Burns to St. Charles. And that's that, but you asked earlier, do we have the traffic from the municipal airport?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. We see all the small flights all the time at Bear Creek, but the FAA, when you look up in the air, you see airlink at least once a day, if not more often. And their direct path, just for the purpose of getting there as quickly as possible, is right over Bear Creek. So wouldn't the FAA apply that to that not make, just making it more of a place where it shouldn't be?
Yeah, so we're getting a little bit off topic here, but I'm going to address it to some extent. Yeah, yeah. So we actually met with the Oregon Division of Aviation, or Department of Aviation, to talk specifically about whether or not they had any rules or requirements. One of the things that came up is that some of the airport training people use a lot of terrain out east of town, and some of that is above some of the other candidate sites. And the question was, are there any regulatory issues related to that? And they have not given us a conclusive answer back, but his blanket statement is that the Department of Aviation strives to be in step with the FAA on it. And he was not aware of any restrictions regarding air traffic. You know, those aircraft are required to be over, a certain altitude, and those do not apply to landfill siting. The what ifs out there are definitely they're part of daily life. I mean, the air flight comes over not landfill occasionally too. We see a fair amount of air traffic coming over landfill on a pretty regular basis, but they're pretty far up there. It appears that there is no regulatory guidance or restrictions regarding siting a land. If you said you put a landfill under, you can't put a landfill under aircraft movement, you're not going to put it anywhere. So, yeah, not to minimize the question.
I understand.
Okay.
So Chad, a couple things. We have Susanna with her hand raised, and then there's a few attendees that I need to confirm if they're committee members. So we have a Keith K, and I want to make sure, is that Keith Caceres?
Yes, I would expect.
And then we have a Jared that's assigned, and I'm not sure if that is Jared.
Well, that's Jared Black. Okay, he must have logged in late. Okay, great.
And then the last one, we have a Ron, so I'm not sure if that's Ron Shearer or not.
Yeah, that's Ron Shearer, but he's we're getting seats repopulated, I think, with the commissioners tomorrow. Do you know, Stephanie?
I think so.
Yeah, so Ron's not officially a voting member at this point, but yeah, I think that's Ron Shearer.
Okay, and now Susanna has her hand.
No,
Oh,
I think you
Susan.
got it, Sue. I was just going to ask for folks that are speaking in the conference room to introduce themselves a little more clearly before they start speaking, so we can get it in the meeting notes. Thanks.
Those have spoken, judge your name.
So we have 3 people virtually with their hands raised.
Okay,
The first one is an E. Aspinwall, so I can go ahead and allow them to talk.
Someone needs to
And-
unmute him
Yeah, I asked to unmute.
or her. Mr. Aspinwall, you need to unmute yourself somehow. Or Ms. Aspinwall.
Okay, maybe we'll go to the next person. We have Daniel Baca.
Yeah. Are you there?
Wald is unmuted.
Oh,
All right, how about now?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, my name is Daniel Baca. In regards to this FAA advisory,
Okay, well,
can you hear me?
Yes.
In regards to the FAA advisory, the issue is actually death. Because a bird strike on a plane is what we're talking about, or on a helicopter. It's not a light issue, it's a very serious issue. The pilots and flight attendants, they're just trying to do their jobs. Siting a landfill near them makes this extremely difficult for them to do their job safely, to get home to their families. And that's what it boils down to, is that death is on the line for these people if you put this there. That's what I have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Ms. Aspinwall, do you want to unmute again?
Ms. Aspinwall, are you unmuted?
are you there?
Yes,
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, this isn't gonna work. Apparently.
we can hear you.
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
She's out. I think you keep fading in and out. We cannot hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have put my hand up because this applies to the Milliken Valley.
Okay. We will take open comments at the regular meeting later this month. Thank you.
okay, now we have a Lisa Macknick.
Good morning. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. So first, thanks for your work on this. And I think my question, well, I know my question. It's a clarification. Specifically, I'm curious about which, if you can tell me which of the FAA advisory circulars you're referencing. In both my research and our council submission, I'm a resident, a county resident, and there's an FAA advisory circular of 2006 that references, and there's several that reference a recommendation against locating municipal solid waste landfills within 5 statute miles of an airport. There is, however, a more recent FAA advisory circular dated February 21st, 2020, that in section 2.2.1.1 references section 503 of the Wendell H. Ford Aviation Investment and Reform Act. And that explicitly prohibits the construction or establishment of a new municipal landfill within 6 miles of certain public use airports. And there are, I know, a number of different FAA circulars, advisory circulars that are not necessarily as clearly labeled as we would like in terms of the order in which they're dated and which ones they supersede. So if you could tell me which advisory circular you're specifically using for the 5 mile radius, I just want to be able to understand why the focus on the 5 and not the 6, and make sure that I'm tracking. That's really my primary question. I appreciate the work that the committee has done and the consideration of the FAA advisory circular and the comments that have been shared so far about the challenge of having bird strikes in particular near these airports in an area with a lot of growing air traffic. I don't think that's going to be less of a concern going forward. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. This is Chad Satola. So the 6 mile radius thing has come up a number of times on questions. So we are using circular 150/5200-33C, which you did cite. And the 6 mile restriction applies specifically to landfills that meet very specific requirements. Let me pull it up here so I can cite it specifically.
Chad, you mean specific airports that meet those specific restrictions, right?
Yeah, well,
About landfills.
the airport itself has to meet several requirements. So they are, for the 6 mile radius to apply, the airport has to be a recipient of federal grants under 49 USC 47101, which is generically referred to as the FOR Act. The second requirement is that the airport is under the control of a public agency. The third requirement is that the airport serves scheduled air carrier operations conducted with aircraft less than 60 seats. And the final requirement is have a total annual enplanements consisting of at least 51% of scheduled air carrier enplanements conducted in aircraft with less than 60 passenger seats. We inquired with the FAA specifically on this advisory and the 6 mile restriction back in 2021. At that time, the FAA told us that neither the Bend nor Redmond airports qualified under this circular for one of those 4 reasons. They didn't, at the time, they did not give me a specific reason, but for an airport to qualify, they have to meet all 4 of those requirements. And last month, we did inquire again with the FAA to make sure that that still applied, because we learned that the Bend airport had applied for a grant, and the FAA did respond back that the circular and 6 mile radius requirement does not apply to both the Redmond and Bend airports. So the 6 mile radius thing does not apply at all to those airports. And we're using the guidance of the recommended 5 mile radius for this decision.
And so let me just make sure I understood you correctly. The FAA said that those airports did not fit in that 6 mile category, but they did not tell you why under those 4 reasons?
Well, the email I got in last month, they highlighted requirement number 4, have a total annual enplanements consisting of at least 51% of scheduled air carrier enplanements conducted in aircraft with less than 60 passenger seats. So I did ask them in January if you could let me know which specific criteria they did not meet, and that one was highlighted in the response back.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate the clarification. I still think that the proposed, or at least what I understand, that the conversation today and the proposal to eliminate those 3 sites from consideration based on the 5 mile radius is an excellent and appropriate decision. And thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have any other hands up, Sue?
We do. We have a Leroy Cabana. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Leroy Cabana. I'm watching the thing here, and I know this meeting is only about the two airports, and that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. Listening to all of this stuff, though, what strikes me is important, but it hasn't really been taken into consideration, is the fact that this is a 100-year landfill site. And I mean, when you start quibbling about, well, are we close to the airport, or are we not close to the airport, or should we include the airport, or whatever? Lost in this thing is the whole idea that this is going to be a 100-year site. And you look at the growth pattern in Central Oregon, Deschutes County, especially Bend, and it's clear to say that this is going to be a problem in the future. I mean, anybody can see that if you place these landfills close to Bend, this is going to be a problem in the future. So you may technically be able to wiggle around here and figure out how to say to yourselves, well, we're coloring inside the lines, but anybody can see that in 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 years, this is going to be a problem. And I think that should be included in the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cabana. Again, issues like that are definitely policy questions for the Board of County Commissioners to address. The task of the advisory committee is to find locations that meet engineering, some economic considerations, as well as statutory requirements. We have had a number of people make comments along those lines. The board is aware of those questions, but at this point, we have not received any specific direction regarding that particular issue. Do we have any other hands up, or do any of the SWAC members want to weigh in on anything before we move forward with the recommendation?
We have a Brenda Ackerson. Brenda? We're not able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. I'm a resident of Conestoga Hills, and I live about a half mile from the Rickard landfill proposed site. And I'm very thankful for the FAA requirements, possibly knocking this off the proposed list of sites. And one of the things that I've experienced since I lived here in 2016 is that we have a very big population of mule deer. And also this is a very area that has a lot of bird migrations. I've witnessed like 500 robins in the area as well. And so and also we have issues with the Rickard Road landfill site, concerns about potentially fire hazards, should, that site been approved, our concerns with, the possibility of a crash because of the birds over the landfills, it is a big concern. So I just wanted to know if deer migration and bird migration areas have been factored into this decision.
So we're getting a little bit off topic here, but we have met with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and the U.S. Department of Fish and Game to discuss their authorities over the project. And yeah, there are issues related to a variety of wildlife, and we'll be having further discussions with them. We'll be compliant with their requirements with whatever site, if we end up with a site to put the landfill on.
Thank you very much for all your work. I do appreciate it, and I am hoping that the 3 sites around the airports get removed.
Thank you, Brenda. Anyone else, Sue?
Not in the public. Mike has his hand raised.
Yeah, Mike.
Thanks, Chad. So can you go back, one of the slides that you had earlier that you were sharing, the one that had the map with the circles on it is pretty different, I think, than the one that was in the packet. I think the one in the packet, sure, it was maybe a little less exact. So I'd like to see that again, because it appears that the circles basically touch each other from Redmond in the north and the Bend Airport in the south.
Yeah.
Just asking about, I'm curious. These are measured from like somewhere at the center of the airports, right? And then the radius is a 5 mile radius.
I'm sorry.
Well, so it's a 5 mile radius, and so does this eliminate other sites? I mean, is there anything else that we're not talking about yet, or?
So yeah, let me answer your question. So the first one regarding the quality of the map, I caution Nick Lelak, the county administrator, that I am not a GIS guy, and I generated that off the dial, and boy, did I miss the mark. But I did have the stars within the circles here. So these are actually generated off the GIS, and if you notice that the circles are not perfectly round, because they're based on the property boundary for the Bend and Redmond airports. There were no other sites under consideration at this stage of the project that were within those circles. If there were any in there, they were dropped out in the broad screening process.
And what about BLM sites that are still maybe kind of under discussion, but it's not clear to me if those have actually risen up to be identified on the maps so far or not?
So I did meet with Commissioner Chang yesterday. We've noted at the previous SWAC meeting that Commissioner Chang is going to be going to meet with Senator Wyden to talk about possibly moving a process with the BLM a little bit more quickly. And he'll be meeting with Wyden next week, and I'll hear back from him after that. If you recall during the earlier meetings that we did not include any BLM properties when Tim Shimke and Tom Anderson met with BLM years ago. I think it was back in 2020. They walked out of that meeting with the perception and position that we would not be using BLM property because of the timeline it takes for siting.
I get that part, but are these circles going to eliminate any of those that might be now under discussion conceptually?
No, we won't entertain anything within these circles. And we just haven't gone that far down the road with the BLM option yet. We have to wait to see how successful Commissioner Chang is with Senator Wyden next week.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so if we don't have anyone here, any more question? So the action for the Solid Waste Advisory Committee today is to provide a recommendation relative to the implementation of the FAA Circular 150/5233C, and which is to recognize the recommended 5-mile radius as a requirement for our purposes for landfill siting. So I guess I'm looking for a motion to either accept the 5-mile radius as a requirement or to not accept it and continue to use it as a recommendation. So do we have a motion from a member of the committee?
I make a motion
That we,
to expand the FFA Advisory Circular 150-5200-33C.
and recognize the 5-mile radius as a requirement.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. So we have a motion from Erwin Swetland to recognize the FAA Advisory 5-mile radius as a requirement for purposes of siting facilities. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Keith beat you to the point, Mike.
Great. Go.
All in favor?
Can we just have a quick discussion for a second?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think that, the reason that we're doing this, I mean, yeah, one, there's the circular, but just to emphasize the safety issues, both for, as kind of the community exists today, but also moving into the future, because I think as one of the earlier speakers said, air traffic is probably only going to grow in the region. And so the safety hazards are going to grow. So just to ground it in kind of that public safety perspective, both for the people in the air and for people on the ground. That's the main reason that I support this, not because the FAA is telling us to per se, but because, or recommending anyway, but that it's an important public safety issue.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that, Mike.
Yeah, just to make sure that's the sentiment. It's conveyed to the commissioners.
Yeah. So we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we will be returning to the Board of County Commissioners next Wednesday for an update on our siting process efforts, as well as bring this recommendation to the county commissioners for their consideration. So I want to thank everyone for attending the meeting, in particular the SWAC members who are giving their own time for this project here. And I appreciate you.
Can I make a quick request? I don't know if this is possible, but if it's possible for just to talk, I'd like to talk to Dwight and Ryan about a different issue. I don't know if that's possible right now. Not, are they in the room or are they on the phone?
I know Ryan's on. Dwight, are you in attendance?
Yeah, I'm on.
I'm here too.
Yeah. So yeah.
Maybe you can message me real quick in the chat just to me directly your phone number and I'll call you, Ryan.
Okay. You can do that.
Thank you.
And this is Chris Ogren. I have one question about the upcoming meeting. I remember, I think it was in the January meeting, there was some discussion of possibly some areas that might be excluded due to like state wildlife requirements. Are we hopefully going to see which sites might fall under those exclusions in the next meeting? I just feel like we're whittling down the available choices.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of the focus screening effort. When we met with the federal and state wildlife authorities, there was only one issue that came up, and I believe, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, that we just did not have up-to-date information from the federal government on golden eagle nesting areas. And so one of the sites furthest east out of on the far edge of the county has a golden eagle nest that may impact that site. So nothing is being eliminated outright because of wildlife regulations. Potentially the one site because of this golden eagle nest.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, so Mike, we're gonna get you in contact with Ryan here.
Yeah, Mike, I'll send you an email for a separate Teams meeting. How about that?
Okay. All right, thanks again, everybody, and a special thanks to the SWAC members for giving us the time today. So meeting adjourned.
Good meeting. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Just a
you.
quick housekeeping item. The meeting that's going to be scheduled that is scheduled for February 21st. It will be a hybrid. The in-person will be down at the Deschutes Services Building, not at the road department. So if you're attending in person, that is a new location, starting with the February 21st meeting.
So that's the Wall Street location, right?
Yes,
The main county office is
the main,
downtown.
yes, where the Board of Commissioner meetings are held.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, I can look that up. So, yeah, I'll be there too, so. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, everybody.
They meet a couple of times, you know, some of the commissioners, some of the others, but,